Janet Mefford.
Well, this is a very interesting scenario playing out at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California. A pro-life student named Seth Gruber has been involved with the Center for Bioethical Reform's Genocide Awareness Project. And as part of that effort, he sought permission for several years to display graphic pictures of murdered unborn children on campus. And the idea was to jolt people into the reality of the Holocaust against the unborn. Well, for 3 years, the Student Government Association denied his request. Then a few weeks ago, he and a few others decided to go ahead and do it anyway. It is a really interesting story about how far we need to go as Christians to confront the Holocaust of abortion. And we are just really happy to have Seth with us. Hi, Seth. How are you?
Good. How are you, Janet?
Great. Now, tell us a little bit about your background in the pro-life movement. How did you get involved, in particular, with the Center for Bioethical Reform?
Well, my senior year of high school at Whittier High School in Whittier, California, all seniors have to do a senior project on some given topic. And so I decided, rather than picking some mundane topic that could have been easy, I decided that I needed to know more about the abortion topic. And so I decided to pick that. And as a part of the requirements for a senior project, you have to do about 15 hours of field work at some organization and volunteer work that will factor into the topic that you're focusing on for your senior project. And so I was talking to my mother, who's a former director of a pregnancy care clinic and used to sit on the board of CBR before I was born. And so she recommended that I do my field work at CBR at the headquarters in Orange County. So I ended up doing my field work hours there and interning there with them to get that done. And then they hired me full-time for that summer after I graduated high school.
Now, tell me about the Genocide Awareness Project. How long has that been going on, and what is the crux of that project?
Yeah, well, the Genocide Awareness Project started right about around the early 90s when CBR was founded by Greg Cunningham, and they've been traveling across the nation to colleges. And it's a traveling photo mural display that shows graphic images of aborted fetuses next to images of historically recognized forms of genocide, such as the Holocaust, how we treated African Americans, child slavery, all these different things. And we're not saying that they're the same, but we're saying, look, some of the justifications for these genocides and injustices are very similar to the justifications we are now making in regards to the abortion issue.
Well, that's great. And so you wanted to do this on the College of Westmont College, the campus of Westmont College. This is a Christian college in California.
Yes.
How did you begin to go about getting the permission to do that?
Well, after I founded the Right to Life Club there as a freshman, the first thing I proposed as that club was the Genocide Awareness Project. And given that Westmont is a Christian college, a private institution, you can't just have a Genocide Awareness Project like you could at UCLA. It has to be approved by the Westmont College Student Association or student government. And so I appealed this my freshman year to them, and they said no for reasons that have been recycled over the last 2 years that it's been disproved. And such reasons consisted of not wanting to offend the students on campus, the possibility of students, high school students and parents visiting the college and them not wanting visitors to see such images. And then also due to the large nature of GAP in that it's kind of unavoidable to see. So a lot of these reasons for why they wouldn't want to have a Genocide Awareness Project at Westmont tended to focus more on the feelings of born people, which are important, but those tended to be put over the lives of unborn people.
Now, where were you proposing? Did you have a plan at that time of where you wanted to stand? For example, were you thinking of standing in front of the administration building where any campus visitors would walk in front of you? Where were you planning to stand and display the pictures?
Right. Well, ideally, and interestingly enough, the largest grass lawn on campus is right outside the administration building, and this would allow the most space for the GAP to be set up. This would allow our trucks to be able to unload easily. It was the most ideal place, so that's where I appealed it.
Okay, so maybe they were objecting. Did they say, we just object to that spot? Did they have the option of moving you to a different spot on campus and kind of compromising with you?
No, their reasons weren't so much about where it was until this year. This year they brought up that objection, saying that they don't like that it's right on Kerwood Lawn, right outside the administration building. But in the past years, that really hasn't been the reason. The reason has just been about other people seeing it. And so they actually told me that, well, hey, why don't you just go ahead and do this presentation in an indoor setting, perhaps in a classroom, perhaps in a larger building indoors and somewhere on campus. And history has taught CBR and has taught myself and has taught pro-life activists that whenever you have an optional pro-life presentation indoors, very, very few people come.
Right.
Yeah, so I decided that the students and my peers needed to be educated about this injustice, since we can now say that Westmont has hidden the reality of this by turning down the Genocide Awareness Project. So I did this a few weeks ago, and within about an hour and a half, some administrators had come out, and I was with some colleagues who were not students, and they had essentially, these administrators had asked us to leave, and that they couldn't have these images on campus. And so they had every right to have my colleagues leave because they're not students. But as a tuition-paying student, I was simply exercising my right of free speech. And so it was clear that they didn't really know what to do with that at that point, so I was allowed to stay on campus.
Now, when you were standing there with these pictures, what kind of reaction did you get from people who were passing by?
Always very varied. So some would come up expressing a lot of anger. Some would have just pure shock and tell us that they had never seen anything like this before. And a lot of others would just do the eyes on the ground, walk by, don't look, don't speak to them, sort of just turning away from the issue.
It's terrible. So when the administrators asked you to leave, what did you say to them? You say, I'm exercising my First Amendment rights, I'm not leaving, or what happened?
I told them, no, I'm not going to leave, because I have tried for a long time to bring a pro-life project that would show the reality of abortion in a very controlled and professional way. But since this has been turned down, I am now unfortunately having to resort to more grotesque forms of education, given that the Genocide Awareness Project was rejected.
Wow. So what happened? You were out there for a while, then you stopped. What happened after that?
Just a lot of discussion with the administrators at that point, and then a lot of discussion with with many students, and then articles being written in the student newspaper and whatnot. But an important point that I really want to make is that I certainly started showing these images and will continue to show them to educate students about what Westmont is hiding from them. But more than that now, we've seen through emails from the student president, from administrators telling this to my face, that Westmont does not take a stance on the abortion issue. And this has been told to my face by people who have the authority to say such things, that pro-choice, pro-life, we don't take a stance on the issue.
As a Christian college.
Exactly, yeah. And so that becomes very, very problematic, because Westmont does take a lot of stances, either written in their statement or by de facto, by addressing such things as child slavery, sex trafficking. I mean, we have global focus weeks, and we focus on these things, and we have prayer, and we raise funds, and we raise awareness, and it's a beautiful response to injustices. But in regards to abortion, they're basically saying we're morally neutral. We're not going to take a stance.
I'm just in shock hearing that. I mean,
yeah,
that's amazing to me. I mean, if the church doesn't stand up for the unborn, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
You know,
and it's interesting because they've told me, I've asked why. Why are you not taking a stance? And I've usually gotten about two reasons. One is that, well, Seth, there's a lot of issues. That's one response that I've gotten. And, of course, at that point I asked, really, do any of these issues involve the killing of 1.2 million unborn babies each year?
Right.
Clearly not. And then the second response for them not taking a position is that they want to encourage students to reach their own opinions on the abortion issue.
Well, how can they reach an opinion if they don't let you get out there?
Exactly, and it doesn't reflect reality, because Westmont does take a position, for example, on homosexuality. We take a position, it's written down there that engaging in homosexual acts is a sin, and yet my freshman year we had a global focus week on homosexuality, and we brought in speakers and we addressed it, but that didn't mean that students couldn't formulate their own opinions, so it clearly just doesn't reflect reality.
Well, now, do they allow other types of pro-life activism on campus that are a little less in your face?
There was an abortion debate my freshman year that I organized at Westmont College, but that became very worrisome and really made my heart heavy, because in the post-debate discussion afterwards, facilitated by two professors and then students there, the main sentiment and the main thought that was brought up by students was that this is really complicated. There's no clear-cut way forward. This is just really tough. And that was after hearing Scott Klusendorf, leading pro-life apologist. And so that becomes very problematic. So we can hear pro-life defended and we can see the graphic imagery and then say, it's a tough issue. What can we really do? Okay,
well, I have to ask you this question, because years ago when I saw Hard Truth, which is that video put out by the Center for Bioethical Reform, have you seen that movie? Yeah, I think every American needs to see that movie. It is horrible. I was weeping through I couldn't even finish it. I was just weeping and weeping and weeping. That has been the most effective pro-life tool I've ever used with my non-Christian friends.
Wow.
And, you know, when I hear what you're doing, and I've been reading some of the stuff, and they've been saying, well, this is radical. Of course it's radical. This is a Holocaust. Do we say that when we see the bodies of the Jews, the piles of Jews who are in Dachau and Auschwitz? This is the same thing. It's just it's silent because these children, are in the womb.
Yeah. Exactly, and ultimately, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said that to not speak is to speak, to not act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. And so, as a Christian college, as a Christian community, we can't just say we're not going to take a position on this.
No,
we have a responsibility to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, like Proverbs 31 talks about. And so, by them saying they don't take a position, they are taking a position, and it's that of moral neutrality. And someone has to speak up for the unborn babies who just 25 a week in Santa Barbara are being butchered.
It's terrible. So what's next for you, Seth? What are you going to do from here on out?
My goals for this point is to continue standing on campus at least once a week and really, as I said earlier, educating students about this injustices through the use of graphic imagery, because students really are confused and the nation is confused around this issue. And so we need to establish the facts through many means, but primarily through the use of graphic imagery. And secondly, I want to encourage and perhaps even pressure the Westmont community to take a stance. This is not something that we can just cover our eyes about and say it's a difficult issue. Babies are being butchered. And so I want to encourage the Westmont community, because my heart beats for this campus, to take a position and then to address it, because we do address other injustices at Westmont, and we do so beautifully. We just did recently in the Global Focus Week. So I want the Westmont community to address it in a pro-life way, not a sort of it's an ambiguous issue, but a pro-life way that brings education and empowers students to do something against this injustice.
Well,